welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a recent episode of the Cast Week Next Week show. We're basically going to pull out the key moments, the interesting bits for you.
Right, give you a quick path to understanding what they talked about, who was involved.
Exactly. So our source is the audio from their show, Sunday, April 27th, 2025.
Yeah, and you've got the usual crew, Chris and Paul, the hosts, and then Boogie and The Texter chipping in.
So think of this as like your highlight reel. We're aiming to distill it down, show you some maybe unexpected connections, give you a real feel for their conversations.
Okay, so where did they start?
Well, they kick off the past week's segment with Queen's Killer Queen.
Okay. Classic.
Yeah, and right away they start joking about the lyrics. It's kind of interesting how they connect it.
How so?
Well, they sort of playfully link it to the death of Pope Francis, and believe it or not, Vice President J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance, how does how playing on the name Queen, that sort of thing?
Exactly. A bit irreverent, maybe, but it shows how people can kind of pull meaning from art based on what's happening now.
Right, yeah. Even if it wasn't the artist's original intent at all.
And then that leads them to mention a satirical headline.
Oh, yeah. From where?
But Babylon Bee, the satire site,
Uh-huh.
apparently it was about the Dalai Lama canceling a meeting with J.D. Vance.
Okay, so mixing pop culture, current events, satire. It sets a certain tone, doesn't it?
Definitely. And you also get a quick sense that Chris and Paul maybe don't quite see eye to eye on Queen, which is kind of funny.
So that whole opening really shows how these conversations can just flow, right? Weaving together different threads.
Yeah, totally. Pop songs, news, jokes, and they're not afraid to touch on stuff that could be a bit, sensitive, but they do it with humor.
Gotcha. So what's next after the Queen discussion?
They shift gears into personal updates.
Yeah.
Like what they've been up to. Chris starts off.
Okay.
He mentions he's still looking for a job, but then talks about this send-off dinner for his nephew, Tate.
Oh, right. Tate's joining the Air Force.
Yeah, heading to basic training in San Antonio soon. I think he said May.
And there was a funny story tied to that, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah. Chris shared this great little anecdote about how when Tate was a kid, he was apparently obsessed with being a janitor.
Huh. That's the kind of random detail that makes it feel more, like, real. Yeah.
Totally. It helps you connect.
Yeah.
You're just hearing about their week.
Builds that connection, which is pretty key for these kinds of shows.
And, of course, they talk about the food at the dinner, brisket, some Brussels sprouts dish. Sounded pretty good.
Food always comes up, doesn't it?
Seems like it. And there's this quick joking moment about telling Tate, don't bomb Greenland if Trump orders it. Just their style of humor mixed with family stuff.
Right. It feels very casual, like listening to friends catch up.
Definitely. Chris also talked about some credit union stuff. Paul's on the board there, right?
Yeah, they mentioned that. So what was happening at the credit union?
Well, there was a chamber after hours event and then a board meeting catered by Chicken and Pickle.
More brisket.
More brisket. It was definitely a theme that week.
And these local details, the chamber event, the credit union, it kind of grounds the conversation, doesn't it? Gives it a sense of place.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had a little playful dig at Paul for parking way in the back, calling it servant leadership.
Ha! Okay.
And Chris also went to the credit union's Member Appreciation Day.
Ah, right. Which led to Paul's bullhorn story.
Yes. Apparently they gave him a bullhorn for announcing prizes.
But he didn't end up needing it.
Exactly. It's those little kind of anticlimactic moments that are somehow still really engaging.
Yeah, it feels authentic. Not everything needs to be some huge dramatic event.
So true. Then they talked about Chris's daughter, Molly.
Okay, what was she up to?
Well, Chris had lunch with her lasagna, keeping the food theme strong, and took her to a coffee shop called Oddly Correct before she flew out to L.A.
Oddly Correct, huh? Sounds like a place you'd remember.
Yeah. And there was this funny little coincidence.
Oh.
Molly's friend Kyle just happened to be at the same coffee shop at the exact same time.
No way. Small world moment.
Totally. And it led to a brief chat about dads taking their adult kids to the airport. Just a relatable family thing.
I get that.
Plus, there was some exciting potential news for Molly.
Yeah.
Something about maybe traveling to Europe, working for ESPN with a U.S. Open tennis player. Sounded like a big opportunity.
Wow, that's cool. Definitely something to follow up on.
For sure. Oh, and Chris and his wife, Jane, also checked out post-coffee in Lee's Summit.
More coffee. And food, I bet.
You guessed it. Breakfast burritos with some kind of spicy jam. They seem pretty impressed.
Man, these guys really know how to eat. Or at least talk about eating.
Yeah. And there was a quick mention of Biggie liking NY's muffin. Seemed like an inside joke.
Probably. So what about Boogie's week? Anything major?
He described it as kind of blah, actually. Not much going on.
Okay. We all have those weeks.
True. But he did mention going to a chiropractor for some lower back pain.
Oh.
And that led to him revealing he actually has scoliosis.
Really? Wow. That adds a more personal layer, sharing something like that.
Yeah, it does. And then Paul jumped in saying he'd actually had back surgery himself way back in 2007.
So an unexpected point of connection there.
Exactly. Oh, and Boogie also mentioned going to a little Mexican restaurant. Food again.
Of course.
And then switching gears a bit, Chris and Boogie were both really excited about a movie they'd just seen.
Did they say which one?
They didn't name it explicitly, but based on the timing and context, it sounds a lot like it was Civil War.
Okay. That makes sense. And anything else? TV shows?
Yeah, they touched on the latest episode of Last of Us.
Oh, yeah.
Hinting that something pretty big and maybe shocking happened, especially for people who haven't played the game.
Right. So they cover movies, TV. It's a nice mix with the personal stuff.
Definitely keeps things moving.
So we haven't talked much about the texter yet. What role did they play in all this?
Yes, the texter. Always brings a unique flavor,
Definitely.
Yeah.
What were some of their contributions this time?
Well, you know how they always have an alternative take on the past week song?
Uh-huh.
For Killer Queen, the texter's interpretation was, well, that the Queen of England was secretly Jack the Ripper.
Okay. That's certainly an interpretation. Very texter.
Exactly. Just completely out there, designed to get a reaction.
And they do the history segment too, right? On this day?
Yep. This time, it included Rocky Marciano retiring.
Okay. Factual.
And Beethoven getting kidnapped by Bill and Ted.
Right. Mixing the real with the completely fictional classic texter move.
Totally. You never know what you're going to get. They even attributed a random wet floor sound effect to the texter at one point.
Just adds to the unpredictability.
Then there's the food debate again.
Mm.
The texter chimed in, preferring tri-tip over brisket.
The brisket theme continues, and they called that a California comment.
Yeah, jokingly.
Yeah.
And they also suggested Paul would be a great pope who only communicates via text message.
Huh. Okay, that's pretty funny. Just quick little jabs into the conversation.
Exactly. And the texter posed a fun question, too.
Oh, yeah.
If you could go back and be an extra in any movie, which one?
Ooh, interesting. What did people say?
Chris went with The Outsiders.
Yeah.
Paul was thinking more like nostalgic Spielberg or John Hughes films.
Makes sense. And Boogie.
Boogie naturally joked Animal House.
Of course he did. It tells you a bit about them, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And then the texter flipped the question.
How so?
Instead of being in a movie, they suggested texting into a movie and picked Airplane.
Huh. Okay, playing with the whole concept. Very clever.
Right. And that led to a quick chat about remaking Police Squad. Seems like they all appreciate that kind of humor.
Mm-hmm. Any other texter moments?
A few more quick ones. Asked Boogie about his fictional Coachella performance.
Right, just teasing him.
Suggested hiring the band Radkey for a party. Made a dad joke about Post Coffee being owned by Post Malone.
The dad jokes. Can't escape them.
Never. And after Boogie mentioned the scoliosis, the texter actually provided, like, a quick definition.
So not all jokes, then. Sometimes helpful, too.
Yeah, occasionally. Then they joked about not having HBO for Last of Us.
Relatable complaint.
And then, this was weird, they made some claim about the Santa Fe Trail having cheering crowds.
Cheering crowds on the Santa Fe Trail. That doesn't sound right.
Right. The hosts were pretty skeptical, too. Maybe just exaggeration for effect, or who knows.
Yeah, blurring fact and fiction again.
And finally, the texter recommended a movie, Conclave.
Oh, okay. A serious recommendation.
Seemed like it. They even shared a quote from it, something about the danger of being too certain. A more thoughtful moment.
Interesting. Amidst all the jokes.
Yeah. And one last kind of random comment about Santa Calagon being where trail started. A bit obscure.
Okay, so a real mixed bag from the texter, as usual.
Always. Then they moved into their news quiz segment.
Right. What were the key points there? Any big headlines?
Some quick facts came out, like Pope Francis being born in Argentina.
Okay.
The Jones Road wildfire was in New Jersey.
Cut it.
And Sarah Palin lost her libel case against the New York Times again.
Ah, right. I remember hearing about that. So, quick news hits.
Mostly, yeah. But then they got into the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. stuff.
Oh. What about him?
Well, his comments about wanting to find the cause of autism and set up a disease registry.
Ah. And how did the hosts react?
It definitely sparked more critical discussion. They seemed pretty skeptical, voicing concerns about his views on that topic. It felt like a moment where they engaged a bit more seriously with a sensitive issue.
Right. It's important to note they were expressing skepticism, not necessarily endorsing the viewpoint itself when reporting on it.
Exactly. They were discussing his statement and their reactions to it.
Okay. Anything else significant from the news quiz?
Yeah, there was this item about Ed Martin. Apparently, he was a potential Trump pick for U.S. attorney in D.C.
Okay.
And it came out that he hadn't disclosed a bunch of appearances he made on Russian state media, like RT and Sputnik.
Oh, wow. That's not ideal during vetting.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And they also mentioned his connection to a former Missouri governor, Blunt, which gives it a local angle for their listeners.
Right. Adds that layer of relevance for their community. So a mix of quick facts and more substantial news items.
Yep. After the news, they had their main topic segment. This is the topic.
And the topic was?
Holidays.
Oh, fun. Okay.
They started off talking about favorite childhood holidays. Christmas and Halloween came up a lot.
Pretty standard, yeah.
Yeah.
Nostalgic.
Then they talked about favorite holidays now, as adults.
And what were those?
Thanksgiving, birthdays, and Paul very emphatically declared the Super Bowl a fair holiday.
Huh. I mean, for some people, it basically is, right?
Pretty much.
Oh.
It was funny how passionate he was.
So preferences change over time. Interesting.
Yeah. And then they started brainstorming holidays they wish existed.
Ooh, like what?
All sorts of things. A Super Bowl holiday, naturally. Something in August because it's kind of empty. Meat off the bone day.
Meat off the bone day. Okay.
A whole week off in August. Common Sense Day. Even Clown Day.
Clown day. Wow, that's a choice. It sounds like a fun brainstorming session, though. Lets the personalities come out.
Definitely. Then they looked ahead to the upcoming Memorial Day weekend.
Okay. Any specific plans mentioned?
Boogie said he was excited to use his newly redone pool.
Nice. Good timing for Memorial Day.
Yeah, but that led to, well, a very Boogie story.
Oh, no. What happened?
He found 2 frogs in his pool, and let's just say his method for dealing with them was decisive.
Oh, dear. I can only imagine. Sounds like a uniquely Boogie anecdote.
It really was. Darkly humorous.
Yeah.
You know, the others' reactions were pretty funny, too.
Right. And did the texter jump in on the holiday talk?
Of course. Ask Boogie 2 quick questions. First, his favorite serial killer.
Whoa. Okay. Did he answer?
No, they skipped right over that one, thankfully.
Good call. And the second question?
His go-to breakfast cereal.
Much safer territory.
Yeah, he said Fruity Pebbles or Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Just a classic random texture interjection to lighten the mood after the frog story, I guess.
Makes sense. Keeps things moving.
They also had a quick segment looking at headlines and predictions.
How did that go?
Pretty rapid fire, mostly with sarcastic comments thrown in.
Sounds about right. What kind of topics?
Let's see. Trump policies getting blocked, tensions between India and Pakistan, some DOJ grant stuff, inquiries at Columbia University.
Okay, real news items.
Yeah, but presented with a bit of an eye roll sometimes. Also, a false alarm in New Zealand caused by geese.
Geese. Okay.
And someone dressed as Ronald McDonald getting arrested in Florida.
You can't make this stuff up.
Right. And they joked he'd be a future Trump appointee.
Okay, definitely satirical commentary there. A quick cynical news roundup.
Pretty much sums it up.
So how did they wrap things up?
They finished by sharing their plans for the upcoming week, sort of bringing it back to the personal.
Like a final catch-up.
Exactly. Chris mentioned, still job searching, finishing some training, picking Molly up from the airport, and going to a listener event on Thursday.
Busy week for him.
Yeah. Boogie had a regular work week, but his kids had high school signing day on Wednesday, so we had to be in 2 places at once somehow.
The parent juggle.
Yep. And he was also going to that listener event on Thursday. It was for Stacy Tyndall, wife of the credit union president, apparently held at a place called Johnny's.
Okay, local event details again. And Paul.
Paul had an eye doctor appointment, hoping to open his pool soon if the weather cooperated. And his wedding anniversary was coming up on Friday, May 2nd.
Nice.
And he was actually asking for recommendations for affordable steakhouses.
Always on the hunt for a good deal. Did the texter have suggestions?
Yep. Said he was having steak at home, going to Dallas on Thursday, but recommended Golden Ox and Denny's.
Denny's for steak. Okay, texter. Interesting range there.
Yeah, Golden Ox and Denny's. Quite the contrast. So yeah, that's how they ended it, just sharing their upcoming schedules. Reinforce that feeling you're just listening to friends chat.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up our own deep dive here, we've really covered a lot of ground from that one Past Week, Next Week episode, haven't we?
Absolutely. From queen interpretations and job searches to credit union briskets, scoliosis reveals, movie excitement.
Holiday brainstorming, the infamous frog incident.
Right. It's quite a mix. And for you listening, you probably noticed how quickly they can shift topics, yeah, and how they blend those really personal stories with news commentary and pop culture, all sort of held together by their specific brand of humor.
Yeah, that conversational style is key. Even when they hit on something more serious like the RFK Jr. comments, it's part of the flow. But then you get something totally quirky like the frog story right after.
Exactly. It keeps it engaging, even if you're not, say, deeply invested in Missouri credit union politics or whatever. The way they talk about it makes it interesting.
So if anything we discussed today caught your ear, maybe you want to check out that movie Conclave the texter mentioned.
Or look up more about those news stories, the Ed Martin situation, perhaps.
Or maybe you're now just really curious about oddly correct coffee or need an affordable steakhouse recommendation yourself.
Huh. Yeah, this dive gives you those starting points, right? You can go explore further if you want.
Definitely.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider the power of these kinds of, well, seemingly casual conversations.
How so?
Well, this episode, like many similar ones, it captures a little slice of life, doesn't it? You hear opinions, jokes, worries, all within this specific group.
Yeah, you get a sense of their world.
Right. So what can we actually learn from listening in on these unfiltered exchanges? And maybe think about how our own everyday chats, the informal ones, shape how we understand the world.
That's actually a really interesting point. The cumulative effect of all those casual conversations, something to think about.